My name is Johan Henrikson. I'm the CEO of Verisec. I'm also one of the founders, 13 years of the company. One of the problems with allowing our marketing department to set the titles to these presentations is that they have an idea that we can cover just about any topic in 40 minutes, irrespective of how complicated that is. Of course, I'm not going to give you the end result. The end result, as you all know, is 42. But I will make an effort at least, because we've spent the last 7-8 years working with UK government, specifically within one area, and that's digital identity assurance. And I wanted to take these 40 minutes and talk about some of the experiences that we had working with local authorities, working with central government in relation to those issues around digital identities, and some of the things that we have done in terms of both commercial models and technical models in order to align better with the ambitions that you as government have together, or as we understand it at least. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with who we are, but at least one slide just to give you an impression. We are a security firm. We were founded 2002. We went public last year, so we are on the Stockholm Stock Exchange. Our background is really securing banking applications. A lot of our experience comes from there. The first 5-6 years was exclusively banking, and specifically retail banking, which is basically a large volume of users where the bank wants to pay as little as possible to secure their login and their digital identities. Now, about 7 years ago, we decided to go into government. And specifically, UK government was one of the first areas where we decided to focus quite a lot of our efforts. So banking and government are the two main areas where we are active today. We work mainly in Europe, with Sweden and the Nordics, of course, being our home base of operations. The UK, we have a base in Germany and in Spain, and due to our success in Spain, we now have an office in Mexico as well, and are in the process of expanding into the Middle East, and we have a large development center in Serbia. So that's what we do. Now, when it comes to government, as I mentioned, a lot of focus has been in UK government. That does not mean that we don't have customers, of course, in Swedish government or Danish government, but a lot of work has been done here in the UK, and it's some of those experiences that I want to go through today. Now, 1984, if you can remember that far back, Madonna came out with a song, and that was Material Girl, if you remember. We all live in a material world. Now, the question is, if she was singing that today, whether or not she would have said we're living in a digital world, which is probably more accurate. Almost all of the aspects that we as people do in terms of paying taxes or booking travel tickets or entertainment has become digital in the past few years. And that's quite a dramatic change that we've seen, which means that the digital way of doing things has impacted both the customers, in the case citizens that you are servicing, but it's also impacting the way that your colleagues and the people working within the council are experiencing systems and the expectations set thereafter. Some of the statistics around this is, of course, there's millions of statistics. I've just chosen out a few things, but I thought they were relevant to just the idea of how digital we are becoming. 83% of households in the UK 2013, that was the latest number I could find, have internet access. 73% of adult people in the UK actually access the internet every single day. And I think the last piece of statistics all the way down south, the fact that the access via the mobile phone has increased dramatically since 2010 from 24% to 53%. Now consider that, I mean, that's a dramatic change in how we are experiencing digital content. Somebody said this morning that this may not be a platform, and in some cases, yes, that's correct. But it is a platform in the sense that it's fairly easy to develop applications on this and distribute them out to millions and millions of users fairly quickly. In that sense, it is a platform. I mean, from the point of view of statistics again, during my presentation, typically on average, you would have looked at your telephone at least 10 times in that period of time, statistically. If you had been under 20 years old, you would have looked at your phone 20 times during this presentation. Now, there's even a phobia not to be connected with your mobile phone or not to have your batteries. Do you know what that's called? Nomophobia. No mobile phobia. Nomophobia. So keep that in mind because, I mean, there's even a disease. So it's obviously become such an integral part of our life that we can't really live without it. Now, I thought this was pretty entertaining this morning because we all do our presentations, we do them in isolation. It's not like we talk to each other beforehand and say, oh, let's do a word cloud this year because that's really cool. And then we all go home and do word clouds like this one. But as you probably realized from this morning, more people than I have realized that when you start reading the documents that are published, either by government or by analysts around this area, you find all these words. And usually I start off when I'm doing one of these presentations is to research what's happened in the past year. And in this case, it was about 500 pages of documentation that I was going through. And I was taking notes. And this is just the first 20 pages. After that, I just gave up. There was just so many words that came again and again and again. And it's really difficult to get a handle on what is digital government. Because there are just so many words, so many expressions, so many ideas, so many things to incorporate into what is digital government. So I had to proceed and try to find, another way of looking at it. And one thing that strikes me quite a lot is the fact that all these words don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in the context of cuts to funding. And we heard this morning that there were 2 budget proposals that you will decide upon at some point. And the one is the biggest cut to expenditure, and then the other one is the next to biggest cuts in expenditure. So obviously cuts to funding will be something you will have to live with over the coming years. You have residents impacted by recessions. You have demographic pressures. The category that's quickest growing category, the quickest growing age category in the UK right now are centenarians, 100-year-olds. That's quite dramatic. People are living longer, and these people, they cost quite a lot of money as well. So it is an important factor. We have, as I mentioned before, in relation to our lives becoming more digital, we have customer and staff expectations that we have to look at as well. Most of our citizens expect maybe not mobile content, but at least digital content, being able to do things in a more digital way. And of course, in addition to that, we have things like changing areas of responsibilities, things that we have to acknowledge in terms of the organization and reorganization as well. So it's part of a wider transformation. So trying to boil this down, I had to go back to a document that I actually read a couple of years ago. It's from 2011. It's the Strategic Implementation Plan for the Government ICT Strategy from 2011. And this is actually a reworked diagram, but I thought somehow it still applies quite a lot, because At the very top, I'm not asking you to read all this, but there's something called open government. And at the end of the day, I've put the people organization platform, that's something I added to this diagram. At the end of the day, open government is really about people. It's about providing services and doing that as efficiently as possible. And as you progress down into this model, you see that we're moving into the realm of organization and platforms and landing in something that we could probably call infrastructure. And in that infrastructure, there is, at the very, very bottom, you see effective identity assurance and security, which is really the heart of what Verisec provides. But having said that, there's a lot of people that can say they can deliver effective identity assurance and security. And it's not about delivering those things alone. It's by delivering those things as part of the entire diagram here, as common components, as interoperability and open data, but also working with commercial models to make this viable at all. Because at the end of the day, if it's so expensive that you can't use it, what's the use? It doesn't make any sense. So why is security an important part? Well, obviously you have the threat aspect. I don't want to spend too much time on this picture because you've all seen this type of picture before, but that's really the foundation of that. And that's really materialized into a number of different regulations. Now, you all know COCO, you know the PSN requirements. There are some design standards that may or may not apply in your specific case. There are a number of EU initiatives that will be published in the coming 12 months with relation to digital identity assurance as well, and how they may or may not apply to what you do. We will see, but it is things happening in the background. In the sense that you charge people for different services and maybe use credit card information, then other regulations such as PCI DSS may apply as well. So there's a whole host of different regulations that regulate this portion of the world. And looking at security as we perceive it today, in addition to, I believe, as you may perceive it as well as customers, a lot of it is very, very silo-based. It's based on solving one specific issue and doing that more or less well. But you may find security solutions integrated in a certain CRM system, in a certain application, or in a certain platform. So they are very, very much silo-based. Some of them are extremely expensive and require additional pieces of hardware or other things that are necessary to make them work. They can create quite a lot of hassle depending on how they're structured, which has been one of the big critiques around IT security in the past, has been the fact that it's perceived from the user base as not adding any value. It's just making life more miserable. A lot of solutions are still proprietary, which is worrying because, as I showed you in the earlier picture, and a lot of different speakers have spoken to that effect today, the open standard is extremely important. It is important for you, but it's just as important for our banking customers not to be locked into a certain piece of technology and be dependent on a certain vendor or a certain standard. Some security is completely illusionary. So in the sense of fixed passwords, you might as well not have them because they are so simple to hack. But it is a problem because it is there. And most of your security today, and most of my security in relation to external parties, such as Amazon or a number of different cloud services, are based on fixed passwords today, which is definitely a security issue. So how do we believe, or what are some of the things that we as a company believe that we can do in order to align better with your business, but also with, of course, the banking industry? And at the end of the day, I'm not afraid to say it, we want to sell more products, so it is in our best interest to align with what you think is good as well. And open standards is at the top of the list. And open standards may be different things in different contexts, and I'll get back to that later on in the presentation. Scalability, obviously. Having to deal with banking customers and government, our user base is usually counted in the hundreds of thousands or the millions, and these solutions need to be able to scale to those levels. We need to have flexible components. We don't want to have monolithic applications that solve every single problem under the sun, because they just don't work. You can't update them, they're difficult to keep secure. You need flexible components that you can work with that are specialized at certain things, and I'll get back to that as well. We need to address the issues around cloud. Cloud is one of these buzzwords that has come in the past few years, and it means a lot of different things to different people. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. Being able to put applications out there in the cloud, being able to reuse development work that has been done for other customers, it makes sense. But the security aspect of it is not always there. So I want to get back to that as well. Mobility, as I mentioned, the mobile platform has become more of interest in the past few years. So there needs to be an idea of how we address those issues as well. And not least, even though it's the last item on this list, the commercials around it. How do we create a commercial model that makes sense for us? Because if we don't survive, then our applications won't survive. But again, we can charge so much that it doesn't make sense for you to use it. So we need to navigate those waters as well, and I want to get back to that as well. And the three areas that I want to cover off in quite a rapid succession is the network part with, of course, the internal users, but also those external parties that you wish to work together with. I want to talk about the cloud-based services, because they are, in certain ways, a little bit different. They are an extension of the network that you have today, and as such, they create a different set of problems as well. And I want to address the mobility portion as a separate topic as well, because I think that just the reports that have come out in the past few weeks from IBM and others have shown how little work is actually being done today securing the mobile platform. And it's extremely worrying, considering how much information that we are storing and how much we're using the mobile platform. And when I say mobile, I don't necessarily mean a mobile. I mean a portable device. I mean a tablet and all those types of devices. And shamelessly enough, I'm going to use our product set to exemplify this with. And they're all called Freya, so they're very easy to remember. And they have different names at the end. So I'll cover these off, but just as examples. This is not a product presentation, but I want to use them as examples of the different components and how they can be used in different areas to address different issues. So let's get to the network identity assurance portion. Now, what's some of the challenges that we have seen within public sector UK in the past few years? And I realize there's a lot of text here, but I'll try and go through this. Now, one of this is remote user bases growing. Now, when we started off 7 years ago, a lot of you had remote users working in your networks. But they were usually counted in the hundreds, or maybe even the thousands, but that was the extent of it. Today, the average size of, when we're talking about remote user base, is the tens of thousands. That has grown quite dramatically in the past few years. And that has become a challenge, not least because some of those solutions that were invested in 5, 6, 7 years ago, the investment decision was based on the fact that you would probably not be more than 500 users or 700 users or something. But what happens when you grow that installation base to 10,000? Then suddenly it becomes prohibitively expensive. So This is definitely a challenge that we've seen time and time and time again within most of the customers that we're working with. Of course, there have been regulatory requirements and there have been initiatives as well, such as EAS over time that have required different technologies to support them. And they still exist, and there will continue to be regulatory requirements over time. What we have seen in a number of our existing customer accounts is the fact that the regional collaboration has become increasingly important. And I've just taken two examples, the Kent PSN and the London PSN, but there's the CPSN, there are London boroughs collaborating. There's a whole number of different regional collaboration efforts where usually it is neighboring councils, for instance, that want to collaborate around certain shared services. And that is a challenge if you think about it in the context of digital identities and being able to have staff that moves across borders and works in multiple local authorities, able to log in and so on. It is definitely something that has to be addressed. We've seen in a number of instances partnerships such as, and it shouldn't say policy there, it should say police, of course, with the police and the fire and rescue, wanting to bring in them into your networks in different contexts. And you want them to be able to use strong identification to your network. Some of you have started working around the idea of letting citizens in and doing different things, which of course means growing the user base even more. And of course, at the end of the day, we have the mobile platform. We need to have some way of reusing this. And why do I say that? Well, you all know how the token device looks like. I didn't actually bring one with me, but the little token physical device, there's nothing wrong with it from a security standpoint, but from a cost standpoint, it doesn't make sense whatsoever, because it costs extra for you to have it, of course. You need to deploy it, you need to get it out there in the field, and there's a cost associated with every single thing. This platform, however, is usually out there already. It's an app. It's fairly easy to install, and you can provide two-factor on this type of unit as well. So there's a lot to be said for supporting that. So as I said, I would use, in this case, it's Freya ID. It's our authentication server. There's nothing spectacular with authentication servers. But what we tried to do from the beginning was to base this on open standards. Now, what's open standards in terms of authentication? Well, that's OAuth and OKRA. Those are the open standards that have become dominant design. Since the inception of EAS, the Employee Authentication Scheme, that never took off, by the way, but still it set the scene for oath used within public service. And that was one piece of technology or a decision that was made very consciously at that point in time that has stayed with us over time. Scalable, of course, we have all of those interesting things there. Of course, you want to have an easy migration, and you want to be able to use it for all those user groups. You want to use it for your employees. You want to use it for the fire and rescue. You want to use it for your regional collaboration, and you want to use it for your citizens, but you don't want it to be prohibitively expensive. Now, how did we solve that? Well, basically, we said, okay, we'll just have an unlimited licensing model. Why should we have a user-based licensing model? It doesn't make any sense. Of course, it makes sense if we wanted to, make as much money as possible, but it would limit the scope of you using the product. Because at the end of the day, the marginal cost of adding another user in this server environment is zero. And that's really where the cost of authentication needs to be driven towards. It will never reach zero for the simple reason that if it is zero, nobody wants to do it, and so there won't be a product. But it's driving it towards there that's so important. The federation identity assurance, what's the challenge there? Well, now we're in the realm of PSIF. Now we're talking about identity providers. Now, what happens here? Well, one challenge is become the increased use of cloud. Now, G-Cloud services are a brilliant example of it, because most G-Cloud services don't actually support PSIF. They don't support identity federation, but they should, because it would make sense for you. Because if you want to use 10 or 20 or 30 different applications from the G-Cloud, the last thing you want to do is to have users stored in each of those applications and have the users have 10 or 20 different passwords to access these applications. It doesn't make sense. You have an Active Directory today. Most probably it's an Active Directory, but you have a directory structure at least. And you have your users stored in there, so why not reuse that for authenticating towards cloud-based services? Some of you are using external cloud services already today. Microsoft 365, for instance, is one of those that we hear time and time again coming up. So obviously there is a need also to support authentication to external cloud services. And funny enough, the PSIF standard is not a UK government standard in itself. It's basically SAML 2. Boiling it down, it's an open standard. There's nothing magical about it at all. Which means that if you support PSIF, you also support SAML 2, and basically you support that type of authentication to all cloud-based services that are of a certain size. There are a number of smaller cloud-based services that do not support SAML 2, but a lot of them do. So basically it's all about extending the identity assurance to cloud-based applications and reducing the complexity for the user of having multiple identities. Basically we're talking single sign-on for users. That's really what it's all about. And when we come to the collaboration efforts that you may have on a regional level, the idea of identity federation becomes even more important, because of course you want some sort of federation. If you trust each other, then you may want to do the identification of the user within their home council environment and then pass that information on to another party that you're working together with. So the federation idea can be done on a regional or local level as well, and bring value to the table. So in this case, what we're proposing is a product called Freya Connect. And basically it does all of those things that I just mentioned. At the end of the day, it is an identity provider. Now, you heard that term this morning in the context of Verify UK and so on, that you could have actually a number of identity providers. And the speaker there was one of those identity providers that you could choose from. But at the end of the day, the tax authority could be an identity provider. You could be an identity provider. And one of the issues that will come out of this is that a lot of the attributes necessary to build some of those applications that you will want to build in the future for your users, a lot of those attributes reside within the context of your environments. They don't reside within the context of Verify UK. They don't have that information. You have that information and you update that information. So at some point in time, you will want to be an attribute provider as well. You will be the one that will be queried from an application. What attribute does Johan Henrikson have within the context of being a citizen living in a certain council, for instance? That's what all this is about, and supporting this type of standard. So here we can support PSIF and SAML 2 and all of those nice things that have to do with identity federation. And again, the marginal cost of adding a user, well, that's the cost you have to Microsoft for adding a user in Active Directory. But in the context of our product set, there is no additional cost because we'll query the Active Directory. So why should we charge you thereafter? It doesn't make sense again. So there's a one cost, enterprise cost, and then you can use that for 1 million users if you want, because it makes sense. Now, getting to the mobile platform, There's been an extreme push for new applications on the mobile platform. We see that all the time. In the banking industry, they've even gone from developing for the web primarily, going to developing on the mobile platform first, and then taking those developments into the web-based interface. So there is quite a large push for new applications, and it's everything. I have a company car, and one of the things that I received together with the company car was an app. That I could monitor how I drive, how much consumption I have, but it also keeps track of where the car is at a certain point in time. I can lock the doors, I can open the doors, I can do a whole host of different things, and everything is on a mobile app. So it comes into homes, it comes into our cars, and to the extension that it's used for fleet management today. We had one project which was extremely interesting. It was the transport of diamonds. And the problem was that the cars were issued with satellite GPS tracking systems, which meant that basically that information could be made available to a hacker or something, which would give them the exact positioning of the diamond transport going through the city. Now that requires security, of course, but it actually took quite a lot of work to realize that it was a problem to begin with, because nobody had even thought about the problem. Because it was so obvious that, well, yeah, all the cars have GPS, and that we track their where they are in the city and so on. And these the percentages here are actually from an IBM-sponsored report, and it really says that a very, very small portion of spending on app development was security, and we see that. We've tested almost every single bank security in the Middle East, and I can say that 99.9% of those banking apps are insecure. They leak information, it's easy to come over, there is just no security whatsoever. And these are banking apps where you can actually do quite high-value transactions. 40% don't even test their apps for vulnerabilities, which is a problem. There's no tradition of developing securely in the mobile platform. And according to this report, I don't know exactly, I can't vouch for the validity of that statement, but it's lack of know-how. That's one of the explanations for this development. And I wouldn't find that unreasonable to assume that there is just not that tradition. So what have we done here? Well, I want to illustrate this with an example, but basically what we did was to say, okay, we've developed for the mobile platform identity solutions. So you can get a token from us that works in a mobile platform. Now, when you do that kind of development work, you start having challenges around things like key management. You need to be able to manage the keys stored on this device, for instance, and securely storing it. You get issues around transaction signing. You want to be able to sign a transaction coming from the bank or coming from your host system. You want to be able to secure the communication between this device and the host system. You want to shield the application from intrusion somehow. You want to be able to validate whether or not this telephone has been jailbroken before you install the application whatsoever. Now that could be a choice. You could say, well, we don't care if you install it on a jailbroken phone, and then you can turn down the sensitivity. But if you don't, then you can turn that sensitivity up. But the app shielding is an important part of it. And what we've done is, for those of you that are interested, you can use these crypto utilities. I just couldn't find a better word in English for it. But you can use those when you develop your own apps, or if you have a third party developing applications for you, they can use those crypto utilities in order to provide those security services around. And I think that the best illustration, this is a Swedish example, so it's not completely relevant, but it's a Swedish company called Schoolsoft. And basically, it's a training platform, educational platform. It keeps track of schedules. It keeps track of messages from teachers, headmaster, and so on and so forth. And the idea they have is that they want to enable parents to be able to sign report cards, see whether or not the child has been absent from school and so on, and sign off on that. Be able to do certain basic transactions within the scope of their mobile application. When the parent goes online, there's a richer content, of course, but then they want to use the application that they are using. This has nothing to do with our development. This is basically their platform. But they want to use the app for being able to log into the school site, in this case. So in this case, what we can do is, you don't see us at all. We are just under the covers, and we can deliver technology in there. So that's one of the things that we are doing within the scope of the mobile platform to enable a more secure development. And I don't have the time to do that right now, but we have a booth just outside here, which you've probably seen. It's red, it's really nice. And if you come there, you can see a presentation in more detail, and we can actually show you how the products work. And they took that picture away. It's actually a picture of the booth, but it's just outside here. So, so just go out there and look for something red where it says Verisec, and we'll definitely show you the products if you're interested in that. Thank you so much.